Well, hello, Tal. It's such a pleasure to talk to you today. Today is June 6th, 2022. I am here in Paris, France, and you are in Canada.
Yes, Guelph near Toronto. Yeah.
Excellent. And I know Tal as an amazing movement artist, as um, as a very inspiring practitioner and educator of contact improvisation, and also as an intellectual.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes, I
Thank you.
remember we had conversations about movement history and philosophies of movement and things like this when I
Okay.
met you at Earth Dance in the US in 2013. So thank you so much for being here, and we are here to discuss the topic of dance and men. But before we get into this topic, maybe there's something else that you want to say about yourself or what you do now, or how this like your something about your background with movement, maybe.
Mm. Well, I like this introduction. I've never been introduced as an intellectual before, so thank you for that. That's nice. Um, Something more. The game of self-defining is very fun and lively, I think, because we're always changing and we can always choose new avenues to feel into what it is that we're offering. So I think lately, for sure, the embodiment somatics educator is part of it, and maybe that's slightly more than the dancer choreographer identity, because I'm using dance and choreography hopefully to open doorways for myself and others to be embodied in a general way, to be creative with their bodies. So that would be one part. And I have definitely an extensive background as a body worker. I worked with shiatsu and then with people in the water and something called watsu and water dance. And um, even though I don't uh, offer that as much, it definitely informs me as someone who's very interested in all kinds of alternative touch, healing, and therapy modalities. But in more recent years, I have been working more with men in the simple way of helping them get in touch with the body in general, with working with the body, with connecting emotions and the physical body. Um, yeah, and giving a more palpable experience to that thing we're calling, embodiment, which is a kind of I guess, a buzzword now. Um, so trying to translate that word to actual experience
Mhm.
is something that I'm interested in.
Yes, thank you. I already have two questions. Let me
All
ask
right.
you, well, let me ask you the first question first, and then I go to the dance and men theme. How did dance come into your life?
Yes, I was always physical in the sense that I loved playing basketball in the park as a child. I loved juggling. I loved running around, and um, I grew up in Israel. And at a young age, I would say because the environment I was in was very much encouraging the young men to succeed in the military and to be competitive. Um, it definitely spoke to me at a young age to want to do challenging feats. I think you could say it like that. To be challenged with to see what can the body go to, and that aspect of the training was fantastic. Um, but of course, through going through that experience and being disillusioned with at least what I was seeing as not creative use um, at that time of my force and power, and how it's kind of being in a sense used for things that I don't know if I was wanting to use them for. So when I left the military, um, I was definitely in need of it's not that I could say it back then, but today I can say I was definitely in need of a lot of processing and healing time and understanding myself in a deeper way. And so my first route into creativity was photography. And that allowed me to be an observer and to, I was happy to observe my surroundings, to take a step back and not be so involved and just frame things and look at things. But after a while, I felt like I'm still isolated and very much in my head. This is just intuitive. I didn't have that thought exactly, but I wasn't, you could say, happy. I was, in a sense, isolated. And so my journey into movement was starting to go to these alternative movement classes. First it was free dance. There was a lot of free dance events around Jerusalem. And then later on, at a dance center in Israel in the south, it was called Adama. And I took various dance classes there. Contemporary dance. There was some classes that were about just creating dances together. And I think that's really opened my mind to how much life I feel after being in dance, and how amazing I feel in the body and how grounded I feel. And then shortly after, I think, or it could have been alongside of that, I was starting to go to contact improvisation classes that were happening in Jerusalem. And I think those experiences of suddenly feeling that I can be both strong and vulnerable and creative and arty and sporty all at once really blew my mind. So that was the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Okay, but tell us more about your passion for contact improvisation. Also, like, how did you find these elements of being arty and or artsy and strong and vulnerable and sporty all at the same time? How is it present in contact improvisation?
Yeah, I mean, the history of contact really was because it was started with Steve Paxton as a dancer choreographer that was also versed in Aikido and martial arts and very physical. That essence of having a combination of skill that is very necessary, and then doing it socially with others was just something that I've experienced definitely in sports and playing basketball and even when you play ping pong, you're with another person, your skill, you're kind of in a dance, in a flow. So the uniqueness of doing that with other people and the challenge of being so close to dancing with other people in contact, it was so different that I think it just blew my mind in general as to like the challenge of that, because it was also fun, both fun and uncomfortable, I would say, at the beginning, to dance really close with people and to go to confront all these topics of wait, what am I doing here? This is kind of weird. It can be very awkward. It doesn't always flow. Sometimes it does. On a physical level, I think and this is not something I could process early on, but I think the experience of being able to soften in the body and be lifted by others, and carried through space in different ways, and the relationship that creates to yourself as being able to let go, to let others carry the load for you, to not kind of And definitely, if you want to speak about from a man's perspective, then
Yes.
for a moment to not carry everything on your shoulders, but to say, hey, you know what, it's okay for somebody else to carry me for a moment. I think that was a huge experience, and especially as in contact you have so many strong women, that experience of a woman carrying me, it was, I think, I'm sure, you know, just a radical experience. And these are things I can say today that early on I thought were just like fun. I don't think I could put it quite in that way. But today, when I think about it, you know, we get carried when we're very young, when we're infants, when we're babies, we carried around all the time, and we feel probably amazing, hopefully, if there's a lot of love and care around us. And then essentially we get put down at some point, and that's it. And now it's, you know, the message is now it's up to you to figure it out. And that can lead to a lot of isolation. It's a false narrative that as an adult you need to figure it out on your own and never be carried. And especially for men who are a bit more old school, you know, maybe the generation and different cultures, it's different in every culture and generation, but for sure, I grew up with that narrative of, yeah, men should figure it out, mostly keep their expressions to themselves when it comes to being vulnerable, such as, you know, expressing any kind of sadness or needing of help or anything like that. So within dance, I think I intuitively found that these different qualities could come out non-verbally, which at that time fit me well, because I could definitely not speak about these things like I am now. I was just needing the experiences. Yeah.
This is so interesting, especially the emotional qualities that you're highlighting. When you were talking about the feeling of being carried, I immediately thought of your passion for dance in water too. I was like, that must be there must be a link there for you too. But I think the contact improvisation piece is an important part of the conversation, because when I think about different somatic practices, contact improvisation is one where we actually see a lot of men dancing. It seems like there it's not a problem, whereas in the kinds of dance practices that I teach or that I go to more often, men don't come. It feels only women in class. So maybe why do you think that is? Maybe is it the martial arts component? Is it this kind of like the roughness? It's not, of course, like a combat, but there is this kind of like tumbling feeling, or what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the crossover between martial arts and dance is just of a few degrees, right? So men don't have a problem with identifying in martial arts.
Yes.
It doesn't challenge anything. Quite the opposite. You have many heroes in martial arts. You have Bruce Lee. You have the 80s stars. You have Chuck Norris. You have people who are idols because of these qualities of being, you know, excelling in a martial art and in their bodies. The dancer, as an identity, can be a problematic shift if you're saying, you know, what are you comparing contact with? It depends, of course, but contact is more fluid in its perception of activity, right? It's not a ballroom dancer.
Yes.
So for sure, in that sense, and one of the earlier definitions was that of an art sport. And in that sense, I think it can quite easily be adapted from previous skills like basketball or Aikido or some martial art like Kung Fu or something. And that language can be more familiar. That could be one possibility. But again, it's a niche, you know, so yes. I don't know, within that niche of dance, I think you're right. I think there are probably more men that find it rather than perhaps ballroom dancing. I'm not sure.
Yes, so you know, I was comparing it. For example, I teach Nia dance, so Nia journey dance, even Tamalpa work that you experienced, or five rhythms also has men, or Gaga dance also has men, for example, but like Surya Soul, there are a lot of different kinds of somatic dance practices where not very many people come to. So that's one.
Yeah,
But the other
yeah.
topic
I
is,
think
oh
there
yeah,
is definitely a sporty adaptation for sure.
yes. But
You
your
know,
comments about the gender roles were very interesting also, like the feeling of, oh, I can put down my burden and let somebody else carry me, because I feel like for women, for female practitioners of contact improvisation, it must be equally liberating also to feel like, wow, I can take on weight and I don't need to. In other words, and I think it's part of the philosophy of contact improvisation, the gender roles are not, they don't like, it doesn't matter so much. There's
right.
not like a man does this and a woman does this, like it is, so that's very appealing. And the second point I want to make is, for example, when I teach my Nia dance classes, I feel like people come to movement with such like gendered perspectives, like, oh, I shouldn't
Mm.
do this kind of movement because this is a masculine aggressive male movement, you know. So for example,
Oh wow.
like punches and kicks, like, no, I can't do this, or there's resistance. Or the same way for men to do something that feels flowy or involves the movement of the hips, that's also like, oh, that's for women. So I think contact improvisation is appealing because it doesn't have these kinds of you kind of liberate your head
Right.
from associating movement with like, well, this is masculine or this is feminine, and movement is more like movement.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's very unique. You know, all of in that respect, I think it's still radical. All of the Latin dancing partner dances, you know, from samba to tango to blues dancing, which is maybe not Latin, but anyway, all these different partner dancing are traditionally done as the male lead
Yeah.
and the female follower. And if the partners are brave, they can decide to switch it up, but that's not the tradition. Um, so I think for, you know, I've definitely, I love all types of dance. So I have been to different tango classes and some samba classes and stuff like that. And I always try to subvert the form a little bit and say, all right, show me your part. I'll show, like, let's switch it up for a second.
Mhm.
Because for me to only be pinned as the lead is quite boring, um, if it can't be played around with a little bit. And so in that sense, definitely that practice of CI attracts people who are intuitively, I think, in some way are attracted to the different physical expressions that have to do with opening that spectrum
Yes.
of what is sharp and what is flowy and what is the range in between. And sharp doesn't just have to be masculine, and flowy doesn't just have to be
Yes.
feminine. Um, and that is very psychologically appealing to a lot of people, I think,
Yes.
whether they are aware of that or not. Um,
Yes. Now, you started to talk about this very interesting topic earlier, which
yeah,
is your own work with men and trying to give men a concrete experience of the word embodiment. So
right.
tell us more about, what is it that you do with men, and how do you get men to come, and what happens in your classes, and how
Mm,
do you make them more embodied, and everything.
everything. Well, um, interestingly enough, because in Israel you have a religious community as well, there is, in a way, more space for men to dance with men, because it developed that in Jerusalem there is a school for dance for men specifically, and it has to do with this religious background, and that makes it so there's already a context for men, at least in this area of Jerusalem, to dance with each other and not with women. So I've done a course there that was, in a sense, a mixture of contact and movement skills for men. Um, and I was a guest at that school for a while as well. What what I do is really no different. I wouldn't say it's vastly different, but than what I would do with a mixed group. But what happens is that I think similar to women's groups, there's just a dropping of some need to impress or some need to put on an extra layer of checking out the room. How am I seen by the opposite sex? Am I attractive or not? Or as we were saying, you know, perhaps if I'm a guy who's embarrassed by this, am I allowed to, you know, raise my hands over my head and breathe and make sounds? How would that be perceived if there's women in the room? For most heterosexual men is going to be completely different of an experience than if they're in a room full of guys where we've established some sort of trust. That in itself could be the physical equivalent to telling you, hey, look, I'm open, I'm sensitive, I've got that, this is another part of me. So there is a verbalization of that, but I think that's only one layer. So in our culture that we're already so verbal, and men tend to be potentially very heady, in order to fuse the emotions in the body, to even do something like this with a group of guys could be just the physical thing of like, I'm not here, or I'm not here, I'm not only showing you that I can be protected and closed, I'm showing you that I'm all right with being open, moving. And that in itself can just be healing in a form of expression, because the subtext is you're safe with a group of guys. They're not against you. It's not always a competition. You don't always have to compete with them over jobs, resources, women, etc. They can be there as a support system and support what you're going through. And if you're going through, you know, whatever the range is, you know, oftentimes when you ask, at least my generation of guys growing up in Israel, how are you doing? What's going on? You know, there's two answers, and one is like pretty good or fine, something like that, you know, or great. It really limits the inner experience when you have, you know, fine, great, or pretty good as your go-to answers for how are you doing. And so I would encourage in these groups to get more layers and connect them to the body. So like even to that question of how you're doing, I could say, Hiie, how are you feeling in your scapulas? Or, you know, give us a description of like what's going on in your backspace. And then to kind of encourage you a little bit to, as we're in this group, you might say, oh, I feel neutral, I'm not feeling anything there. And I might go, you know, all right, fine, give it an image. Like if you want to be poetic, give it a landscape. And then slowly you'd say, well, it's like a forest. Okay, what's in that forest? You know, and that just that encouragement for you to be witnessed as you have to, all right, let's see, backspace. You know, stuff just starts to come up. And that, you know, that's special. That's unique. It's different. Definitely for a men's group, but for any group. So I would say not that I do anything that different, but things become different because of that context.
Mm-hmm. And do you do, for example, a lot of like free improvisational movement in that class, in those workshops too?
Yeah, as a warm-up, sure. Sure, and usually, you know, because of having this background as a body worker, I take the clarity of touch as part of the warm-up. So things like being very specific, you know, you can trace somebody's scapula, and the scapula goes up here to the clavicle bone, and we can trace these things very specifically, and create a very clear container about what we're doing. So I think that opens up the warm-up as well, to be less threatening, because free dance, as you're saying, can be for some people, depending if it's a beginner's group, can be too intimidating with the freedom of it, especially if I have this idea that I'm not a dancer.
Yeah.
So I try to give quite concise structure and leave it open if it's a beginning group of men dancing.
Eh, and from your experience with working with groups and clients and participants, is there something that you want to tell us also about, I don't know, some specific examples of you feel how movement has benefited the health and well-being of some of your clients, for example? What works?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I would say that meditation definitely works, and as movement practitioners and somatic educators, I feel like we have more permission to play with the definitions. So I don't always have to introduce it as this word meditation, which, you know, people might immediately think that they need to like sit, or that they've seen some idea of, oh, meditation is a statue that you sit and you have to endure for now. So I think the reframing of that as intimate time with your own body, and taking 5 minutes right now, forget about meditation. You don't have to be a statue. Forget all about that word. We're just taking 5 minutes out of the day. And then, you know, sometimes I'll say 5 and then I'll stretch it to like 8 or 12 or something like that. Because once people settle in, they're more comfortable. And we're reframing it as body time, as time that you're giving to yourself to nourish yourself. And in that time, I might guide loosely into different areas that the attention can rest, in terms of the breath, the backspace, the belly, the sensations. And, you know, 8-12 minutes like that for most people in a day will reorient their relationship to themselves.
That's wonderful. I love this idea of intimate time with your body.
Yeah. So yeah, because people usually don't have a problem with going to the beach or taking a bath or a shower. The moment you say meditation, it's like this big thing. It doesn't have to be. It can just be simplified and introduced as part of healthy maintenance. Yeah. Same thing with, you know, dance and movement. Dance can be this big word, and that could lead to this insecurity. Am I a dancer?
Exactly.
But movement, you know, just ask yourself, are you a mover? Do you move in life? And if the answer is yes, all right, do you want to move a little more creatively? Yes. All right, great. Then come move a little more creatively, you know.
Well, what
Like
would you
that.
tell to a person, let's say a man comes to you and says, Tal, you know, I like going to parties and I want to dance, but I can't make myself dance. Or I want to change my habits. Usually it takes me several bottles of beer to get to dance, but I would like to do it more naturally. I want to feel better. I want to feel more graceful. I want to start feeling free. How would you how would you help this man, for example? I want to dance, but I have these inhibiting words in my head.
Right. Right. Well, I just read this article about intrinsic motivation, and I found that really interesting, that the things that help intrinsic motivation have to do with a sense of community, autonomy, and competence. So that competence means you need to build a little bit of skill to feel comfortable, right? Like even if you want to play ping pong, if you totally suck, you're not going to have fun.
Yes.
So maybe you take a few classes and you start getting a bit of confidence, and you found some amateur club, and you're like, you know what, I'm not the worst person, and these people are kind of nice. Like you have community. And so that builds motivation. I wouldn't say that people need to dance if that's totally not their language. Like anything else, you know, but if you have a desire, even a little bit, and you're curious, and as you're saying, this guy's like, oh, I see other people do it, I want to do it. Then it's like, all right, build a tiny bit of skill, a tiny bit of competence, take a few classes. And when you take those classes, be really soft with yourself and don't compare yourself to anybody. Don't dance with anybody else's body and say, oh, this person is flowy, and that person, I'll never be that fit, flowy person or whatever. You dance with your body. and you feel into your sensations, and your feet and your breath. And then you go to another class and you dance with your body. And you go to another one and you dance just with your body. And by the fourth, fifth class, you're like, you know what? I can connect these things, because that's how the body is. It starts connecting. I can do this, whether it's tango, contact improvisation, or Nia, or improvisational dance, or whatever. And then from that, you find community, because I think that's the other piece of the culture, is it has to be a group that you like, or a culture that you like, because some people love capoeira for that reason, because they bring in the song and the dance, and the whole culture is so beautifully social. Right. And other people like yoga for the opposite reason, because it's maybe isolated, and perhaps they love that everybody gets to be just with themselves. But yeah, I don't know, whatever speaks to people.
That's nice.
Yeah, I think the social cultures are definitely more interesting for me as a very social person that needs relating. I'm looking for, I think, contact community in general attracts very somatic, grounded people that are quite fascinating. So that's why I like it.
And then I have a very broad, big question.
Okay.
Take it in whatever direction you want to take it, which is this one. Do you think dance is good for men's health and well-being? And
yes, of course.
How maybe even you can say something about how, like, what kind of health, because we can think about emotional health, or physical, or mental, or spiritual, or how do you think dance can help them?
Yes, I think dance can help everybody, so of course. And within the particularities we are highlighting, men have a specific benefit to, which is the immediate doorway into having a contact with their emotional body within the dance, potentially, which could be just like almost like having another channel in which to exist, in which to process. So by opening that doorway, I think men can benefit greatly, because when they ask themselves big life questions like, oh, I got this job offer, do I want to take it or not? It's very easy to get very heady about something like that.
Yes.
And start listing like a kind of like a left brain pros and cons, very directional, especially if you're that kind of heady guy already. Well, it pays a little bit more than the last one I had. All right, that's great. That's a pro, But if they feel into their body, they might feel like, I'm just not excited. That my excitement in my solar plexus is zero about this. So should you take it if it pays a lot more, or if it, whatever else is? And so for men especially, I think women, again, not to get too, it's not just like everybody can benefit, but I think women, again, this is definitely culture related as well, and depending where you grew up, but I think they have a little bit more freedom within and permission within their circles to really speak out honestly and openly about how they're feeling, and what, if it creates anxiety for them, or if it's hopefully they have these different circles of friends where they can express that. And I think naturally can sometimes be a little bit more embodied. Of course, that depends on the person and the place. But for men's health specifically, I think that introduction to dance as a potential to get in part with some of a man's feminine energy, to balance out their own energies, is really special and useful. Yeah.
Thank you. Tal, I forgot to ask you earlier, what do you see as some of the recurring or main issues that men bring to these dance movement experiences? Like when you look at your clients, what do you feel they suffer from? Or maybe they tell you that directly.
Hmm. I think it's a general lack of ease with life in the most general sense, and there is a pressure to um, solve everything all at once. You could say it like that. And so if things are not working out, whether it's career or family or relationships or things like that, there can be a buildup of pressure, and so that starts to create a sense of frustration with life, and just a general lack of ease in the body, of connection to space, to pleasure, to potentiality. Yeah.
Well, I'm a strong proponent of dance as a way to find out what we enjoy, also what brings us pleasure, and what the body likes to do, not to be taken
Yeah.
advantage to.
Yeah. And you teach only mixed groups or women's groups as well?
Well, that's an interesting question. All my classes so far, they are for mixed audiences, but they're mostly in my classes. I mostly have women. I have some men, and interestingly enough, although I teach now also in-person classes that I wasn't able to teach during the pandemic, my few male clients who started coming to my online classes, they have not come to the in-person classes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they still feel like, and I actually think it's okay. I think it's a nice option for men to also have the ones who feel more timid, or maybe they don't know if they would like the culture of the group, as you mentioned earlier too. I think it's great that they can, in online settings, they can turn off the camera and they can have a private experience to start enjoying movement, and then they can
Mm-hmm.
find their ways into more public settings if they want to at some point later in their life.
Right.
I have more
Right.
men come to my strength training and stretching classes
Mm-hmm.
because it's different from dance.
Yeah.
They feel
Yeah.
more.
No, that's quite natural. Probably if there was a few, you need a few to start the momentum. If there were 3 or 4 men probably in the live class, then the next one would be feeling at ease.
Yes. But you know what I've noticed about the men who do come to the dance classes? They are very, how should I put it? They're very curious about movement, and for them I feel like the dance classes are not just I come here to sweat or I come here to have a good time. They actually really think about movement after class also, or what the experience was like for them, or they're kind of like movement thinkers as well. there's a
Mm.
there's a bigger meaning behind the dance for them, I feel.
Mm-hmm. So they're seeking out the development of the skill of how
Yes, but
the.
they're also somehow seeking out more the development of the self too. They see,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about these few people who come to
Sure.
class. I feel like for them, movement is also a path towards something else too. A path
Mm.
toward a transformation, or a path toward feeling confidence, or a path toward feeling in touch with their intuition, or something like this too. They yeah, or
Yeah.
creativity. They actively speak about these aspects of movement, which I find very
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable too.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah, that might be a good invite for men, to appeal to that part of their desire for it. This is really fun, but what is it good for? That's
Mhm.
like that kind of question. And as you're saying, it is excellent for developing the self, I think.
Mhm. Tal, is there something that I haven't asked you that you would like to say and share with us on this topic, or anything else about movement for you, movement for
Hmm.
men, how you have grown as a mover with your students and witnessing their journeys or something?
Hmm.
Feel free. No pressure though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe you have a message that you would like to deliver to men
Oh,
about
wow.
movement.
Yeah, I think for everybody, I think yeah, I think the beauty of men's work is similar to women's group. It's the beauty of supporting each other in these containers so that then we also collaborate better with everybody. So whether it's women's groups, men groups, or mixed groups, um, the overall invite for myself as well is really to take time daily,
Mm-hmm.
which is that intimate body time, and um, to be generous with that, so that um, we can then be more generous with others. That's the big message.
And does your intimate body time, does it change from day to day? Like one day you do something, the other day you do something different during that time?
Definitely. Um, I mean, personally, I try to incorporate meditation and some sort of movement every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, for the way that I'm built, it needs to be a little bit different every day, and not the same routine exactly. But I think that potential to create a self ritual, a daily self ritual, um, that can really benefit everybody. And so on the way to build that, I definitely recommend movement and trying out different kinds of movement and different kinds of classes, different kinds of dance classes. And try your class, my class, anybody's class.
Yes.
Uh, it's and to think of movement and dance as bigger than movement and dance as we're speaking here. I think that's also a big part of, because otherwise it stays theoretical.
Right.
And I think the potential is to affect your life in a bigger sphere has to be experienced.
And Tal, now when people want to come, if men or maybe even women also, if they want to come to
Absolutely.
your classes, how can they find you? Where do you teach?
Well, they can definitely find me on my website. That's just my name, Tal Shibi, TALSHIBI.com. If they want to send me an email to work one-on-one. But lately, there isn't anything ongoing. There's something happening in Vienna soon. If anybody is in Vienna,
Oh,
they can jump in. That's happening
is this
next week.
open for women also, or?
Open, completely open. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I'll be in
Yeah.
touch with you about that. I've
All right. You're
wanted to
welcome.
go to Vienna. It's not too far from me now.
Okay. You're welcome to jump in. Yeah.
And do you teach online also? If you do anything, do you teach online also? Can people reach you from different corners?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Especially for the one-on-one mentoring and coaching. And that I have done that only mostly for men, but definitely is possible for women too, which is like a series of meetings around these topics of movement and meditation and grounding. That, yeah, definitely you can do that
Yeah.
from anywhere with anybody.
I feel, Tal, like this is one of the conversations. Maybe we'll do another conversation on touch and
Oh,
water
wow.
and
Yes,
something
absolutely.
else. And so now that people's interest has been piqued, we can continue with these topics.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you
Wow.
for the invite and the questions. It's definitely worthwhile to talk about this.
Okay. We hope that people feel inspired and stay tuned for more. So this was
Yes.
us here. He is Alma from Paris and Tal Shibi currently in Canada, but soon in Vienna and other places in the US also. You can take classes with him.
Thank you.